March 28, 1972. 18,000 feet above the Gulf of Tonkin. The sky is a pale, bleached blue, streaked with high cirrus that look almost harmless. Below, the dark water rolls in long steel-colored swells. The deck of the aircraft carrier USS Constellation shrinks into the haze behind them as two gray shapes slice northward at nearly 600 knots. In the lead cockpit, Lieutenant Randy Duke Cunningham squints through the canopy glare. His oxygen mask hisses softly with each breath. The twin engines of his F-4 Phantom II rumble like distant thunder behind him. In the back seat, Lieutenant J.G. William Irish Driscoll scans the radar scope. A green bloom pulses across the circular screen. Contacts flicker, fast, erratic. Multiple bogies lifting out of Fujian, Driscoll says, voice steady but tight. Fujian, the home nest of the Vietnam People's Air Force. For years, American pilots had been bleeding in these skies. Missiles that wouldn't fire. Rules of engagement that forced visual identification. Enemy fighters that struck from the sun, fired, and vanished into cloud. But something has changed. Back on Naval Air Station Miramar, a brutal little school had been created after 1968's sobering kill ratios. Its official name was the Navy Fighter Weapons School. The pilots just called it TOPGUN. Cunningham rolls slightly left, scanning. The Phantom shudders in light turbulence. Sweat trickles down his spine despite the cockpit cooling. Duke, they're climbing hard. 2-3 contacts. Angels 23 and pushing. North Vietnamese MiG-21 interceptors. Small, agile, deadly in a turning fight. For years, MiG pilots had exploited American weaknesses: heavy jets, poor dogfighting training, over-reliance on unreliable missiles. They had learned to bait Phantoms into vertical maneuvers, then slash across their tails with 23mm cannon fire. But Cunningham and Driscoll were not the same breed that had arrived in 1965. They had trained relentlessly against dissimilar aircraft. They had memorized energy states, nose authority limits, radar envelopes. They had flown until their vision blurred and their instructors shredded their egos. The radar tone sharpens. Duke, tally 3. 11 o'clock high. Closing fast. Their tiny silver darts flashing in the sun. The MiGs break formation with disciplined precision. One climbs vertically, forcing a reaction. The other two dive low, using the Phantom's blind spots. Cunningham doesn't chase the climber. Instead, he banks hard right, converting altitude into speed. The Phantom's nose slices downward. The G-forces slam into his chest like a physical weight. Stay high energy, he mutters. Driscoll locks one contact. Fox 1 ready. But radar-guided missiles are unreliable in tight merges. Cunningham knows it. The first MiG flashes past in a blur. Gray wings, red star barely visible. The sky explodes into motion. The Phantom rolls inverted, pulling through into a high yo-yo maneuver. The MiG pilot expects the American to commit to a flat turn. He doesn't. Instead, Cunningham climbs slightly, preserving energy, then drops the nose back down. The MiG overshoots just slightly, just enough. Tone, Driscoll shouts. The Sidewinder growls in their headsets. Fox 2. The missile tears off the rail in a white plume, arcing toward the MiG's hot exhaust. The North Vietnamese pilot sees it too late. The explosion blossoms against the blue sky like a sudden orange flower. Debris scatters downward in a spinning trail. But there's no time to celebrate. A second MiG is already behind them. Brake left. Brake left. Cunningham slams the stick over. 9GS crush him into the seat. The Phantom shudders violently. Warning lights flicker. Tracer rounds flash past the canopy. The MiG-21 pilot presses aggressively. For years, American crews panicked in these moments. Dumped energy, dove for the deck. Cunningham does something different. He slows. Intentionally. The Phantom's nose pitches upward. Bleeding speed. It's risky. Dangerous. The MiG pilot, anticipating a high-speed extension, misjudges the closure. Overshoot. Now! Cunningham snaps. The Phantom rolls, nose slicing down onto the MiG's exposed belly. Tone. Fox 2. The missile streaks forward. This time the MiG tries to flare, too late. The blast tears off a wing. The aircraft tumbles, spiraling toward the jungle-covered hills of North Vietnam. Silence fills the cockpit except for heavy breathing. 2 MiGs down in less than 4 minutes. Below them, anti-aircraft fire begins to blossom, black puffs rising like poisonous flowers. Driscoll scans again. Third contact disengaging north. The surviving MiG climbs hard, afterburner blazing, retreating towards sanctuary. For the first time in years, something unfamiliar ripples through the radio chatter of American strike packages behind them. Confidence. Word spreads quickly over secure frequencies. 2 MiGs splashed. Clean maneuver kills. No American losses. Back at Phuc Yen, controllers watch their scopes in disbelief. Intercepts that once ended with phantoms burning are now collapsing in seconds. And this isn't an isolated engagement. Over the coming weeks of Operation Linebacker, Navy squadrons trained by Top Gun will begin shifting the balance in the sky. Kill ratios that once embarrassed the Navy will climb dramatically. But up here at 18,000 feet, none of that matters. Cunningham steadies the Phantom. The coastline lies ahead, dark green jungle, curling rivers, hidden SAM sites waiting to fire. The war isn't over, but something fundamental has changed. The North Vietnamese pilots who once hunted heavy American fighters with near impunity are about to discover that the men now arriving in these skies are different. They've trained for this exact moment, and they are not afraid to turn and fight. Phuc Yen Air Base, 40 miles northwest of Hanoi. The operations room smells of cigarette smoke and hot electronics. Ceiling fans rotate lazily, pushing thick air across maps pinned with colored markers. A radar controller pulls off his headset, eyes fixed on the plotting board. 2 symbols have vanished. Captain Nguyen Van Cock of the Vietnam People's Air Force stands rigid, flight helmet tucked under one arm. He doesn't need confirmation. He can read the silence. Both? He asks quietly. The controller nods once. Across the room, a political officer scribbles notes. Losses are not just tactical here, they are ideological. For years, the narrative had been clear. American aircraft were fast and powerful but predictable. Heavy Phantoms could be dragged into turning fights, forced to overshoot, lured into missile envelopes prepared by ground control intercept teams. North Vietnamese doctrine depended on precision timing. Controllers vectored MiG-21 pilots into perfect ambush geometry. The Americans rarely trained for dissimilar air combat maneuvering. They trusted missiles. They avoided the gun. But today's engagement had felt different. In the debrief tent, a surviving pilot, Lieutenant Tran Minh Phuong, removes his gloves with shaking hands. They didn't chase, he says. The squadron commander leans forward. Explain. We split vertically. The American leader did not follow the high element. He stayed fast. He forced overshoot. The room falls quiet. Overshoot. That word is wrong. Phantoms were supposed to be clumsy in close maneuvering. Their large wings bled energy. Their smoke trails betrayed them. For years, MiG pilots had been taught that if they could survive the first missile exchange and force a merge, the advantage shifted decisively. But now, they anticipated, Tran continues. They maneuvered before we committed. A chalk squeaks against the board as the commander sketches the geometry. The American jet didn't react. Predicted. Across the table, a veteran instructor mutters, "New training." Meanwhile, hundreds of miles south over the Gulf, the Phantom from USS Constellation punches through scattered clouds, turning back toward the carrier group. Lieutenant Randy Cunningham exhales slowly. His gloves are damp inside. "Not like the stories," Driscoll says from the back seat. "No," Cunningham replies. "Not like the stories." The stories were from 1967 and 1968. Navy pilots caught unprepared. Radar missiles failing at close range. Rules of engagement that turned lethal seconds into fatal hesitation. Back at Naval Air Station Miramar, instructors had dissected every loss. Film footage slowed frame by frame. Every mistake labeled. Every bad habit punished. Students were thrown into mock dogfights against nimble A-4 Skyhawks that simulated MiG-17s and T-38 Talons mimicking MiG-21 profiles. They were forced into energy management drills until their instincts replaced panic. Never chase vertical bait. Never sacrifice energy for position without a plan. Force the overshoot. The Phantom hits light turbulence as they descend toward the carrier stack. The sea glitters beneath them like shattered glass. "Duke," Driscoll says quietly. "They're good." Cunningham nods. The North Vietnamese pilots are disciplined, aggressive, fearless. Many trained in the Soviet Union. Some are already aces. But something subtle has shifted. Over Hanoi that afternoon, another Navy section encounters MiGs. Instead of scattering American formations, the intercept collapses quickly. A MiG pilot pulls into a tight horizontal turn, an old, reliable tactic. The Phantom stays vertical. High yo-yo. Energy advantage preserved. Sidewinder away. Explosion. On the ground at Phu Quyen, mechanics watch the sky for returning aircraft. Only one silhouette appears on approach instead of three. The mood changes. Instructors gather surviving pilots for emergency review. Tactics are adjusted. Controllers become more conservative. Engagement windows shorten. Abort calls come earlier. A pattern emerges over the following weeks of Operation Linebacker. MiGs that once pressed aggressively now disengage sooner. American pilots begin pressing north with increasing boldness. The kill ratio, once humiliatingly low for the U.S. Navy earlier in the war, starts to tilt sharply. But statistics don't capture the real transformation. The transformation is psychological. In the cockpit of a MiG-21 climbing toward a radar vector, a young North Vietnamese pilot now hesitates for half a second longer before committing to emerge. He has heard the stories. American Phantoms that don't panic. Phantoms that bleed speed intentionally. Phantoms that force overshoot traps. Back aboard USS Constellation, deck crew swarm Cunningham's aircraft as it traps with a violent jolt. The arresting cable snaps taut. The jet slams from 150 knots to 0 in seconds. Canopy open. Salt air rushes in. A deckhand gives a quick thumbs up. 2 red stars are soon painted beneath the cockpit rail. But there is no celebration on deck. Because tomorrow they will go back north. And the enemy is adapting too. At Phu Quyen, Captain Gwyn stands alone outside the hangar as dusk settles. The jungle hums beyond the runway. He watches mechanics refuel the remaining MiGs. "They have changed," he says quietly to himself. He does not yet know the name of the school in California. He does not yet know how deeply it has reshaped American fighter doctrine. But he knows this. The sky over North Vietnam is no longer predictable. And for the first time in years, his pilots are not the ones dictating the fight. March 3, 1969. Naval Air Station Miramar, California. The Pacific wind whips across the runway, carrying the sharp smell of jet fuel and salt. 2 aircraft scream past the control tower at low altitude, one tight on the other's tail. In the lead is a small, nimble Douglas A-4 Skyhawk painted in camouflage. Behind it, a massive F-4 Phantom II struggles to keep its nose inside the turn. Inside the Phantom's cockpit, a Navy lieutenant pulls harder. Too hard. The aircraft shudders, bleeding airspeed. The angle of attack warning light flickers. "Knock it off," comes the call over the radio. The A-4 rolls upright and climbs away effortlessly. On the debrief floor an hour later, there is no sympathy. At the front of the room stands Lieutenant Commander Dan Peterson, one of the founding architects of what would become the Navy Fighter Weapons School at Naval Air Station Miramar. He clicks the projector. Gun camera footage freezes mid-frame. "You chased," Peterson says flatly. The lieutenant shifts uncomfortably. "He baited you vertical. You bled energy. You became predictable." The room is silent except for the hum of the projector. This is not like other training squadrons. There are no easy passes here. No polite debriefs. Every error is dissected. Every assumption challenged. Because in 1968, the numbers had been undeniable. Early in the war, American fighter pilots had expected missile technology to dominate the sky. Radar-guided Sparrows. heat-seeking sidewinders, long-range intercepts. Instead, rules of engagement forced visual identification. Missiles failed, and dogfights, raw, violent, twisting dogfights, returned. Against smaller Soviet-designed fighters like the MiG-17 and the MiG-21, U.S. Navy kill ratios had dropped to alarming levels. Miramar was the answer. Here, instructors flew as the enemy. The A-4 Skyhawk became the stand-in for the MiG-17 light, tight-turning, merciless in close fights. The T-38 Talon simulated the MiG-21, small, fast, hard to see. Students were thrown into 1-versus-1 engagements, then 2-versus-1, then complex multi-aircraft scenarios where chaos was the point. In one training hop, a Phantom crew enters a merge expecting a horizontal fight. The A-4 brakes hard left, nose slicing across the Phantom's canopy. The student reacts instinctively, pulling into the turn. The instructor in the A-4 smiles behind his visor. He tightens the circle just enough. Overshoot. In seconds, the Skyhawk is behind the Phantom's tailpipe. Guns, 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 comes the call. Back in the debrief room, the student watches his own defeat replayed on screen. You assumed, Peterson says. The enemy is not obligated to fight the way you prefer. The lesson drills deeper than tactics. It reshapes instinct. Energy management becomes religion. Vertical maneuvering becomes survival. Students are taught to think in 3 dimensions: altitude as currency, speed as life. They learn not to panic when a MiG flashes past the canopy, not to yank the stick blindly, not to bleed airspeed in desperation. And perhaps most importantly, they learn humility, because here they lose often. By 1972, dozens of Navy crews rotating into Vietnam have passed through this crucible. Men like Lieutenant Randy Cunningham and William Driscoll carry those lessons north into contested skies. And the difference is measurable. During Operation Linebacker, Navy air-to-air performance surges. Engagements that once ended in confusion now resolve decisively. MiG pilots find their usual traps anticipated, their ambush geometry disrupted. Back over North Vietnam in April 1972, a pair of Phantoms from USS Constellation intercept a MiG formation climbing through scattered clouds. The MiGs split vertically. The lead Phantom does not chase. He climbs just enough to preserve energy, then rolls into a descending attack. High yo-yo executed cleanly. Sidewinder tone. Missile away. Another MiG blossoms into flame against the humid sky. On the ground at Phu Quyen, instructors revise chalkboard diagrams yet again. Americans no longer commit blindly, one says. They are patient. In the cockpit of a MiG-21 accelerating toward another intercept, a young pilot grips the stick tighter than before. The Phantom is still larger, still leaves smoke, still carries heavy missiles. But now it turns with purpose. Now it anticipates. Now it fights like it has studied every move in advance. The sky over Hanoi has become a chessboard, and the Americans are no longer playing checkers. And the realization spreading through North Vietnamese squadrons is unsettling. The hunters have learned how to hunt back. May 10, 1972, 10:43 a.m. Over Hanoi, the humidity is suffocating even at 15,000 feet. Heat rises from the Red River Delta in shimmering waves. Below, the city spreads in pale concrete blocks and tree-lined boulevards. Above it, contrails and missile smoke twist across the sky like claw marks. It is the opening day of intensified strikes in Operation Linebacker. From the decks of carriers in the Gulf and airbases in Thailand, waves of American aircraft surge north. And waiting for them, alert, armed, engines already spooling, are squadrons of the Vietnam People's Air Force. At Phu Quyen, MiG pilots strap into their MiG-21 interceptors. Ground controllers feed them vectors with clipped urgency. Target group approaching from southeast. Angels 16. Captain Nguyen Van Cock shoves the throttle forward. The MiG leaps down the runway and claws into the sky. He has reviewed the new American tactics. He has warned his pilots. Do not overshoot. Do not commit early. Do not assume. High above, 2 gray F-4 Phantom II fighters cut through thin cloud. In the lead cockpit sits Lieutenant Randy Cunningham. In the rear seat, William Driscoll tracks the scope. Multiple bandits lifting, Driscoll says, vectoring fast. Around them, the sky is chaos. F-105s diving toward rail yards, A-7s lining up on bridges, SAMs rising like telephone poles of smoke. Then the MiGs arrive. They descend from the sun in disciplined pairs. One Phantom in the strike package reacts too sharply, braking hard and dumping speed. The MiG snaps onto his tail. Cunningham sees it. Driscoll, lock the high element. Instead of diving to assist the threatened jet directly, Cunningham climbs slightly, preserving energy. The MiG pilot chasing the American below expects panic. He expects another Phantom to rush into the horizontal turn. But Cunningham rolls into a vertical maneuver, high yo-yo, arcing above the fight. Tone, Driscoll calls. Fox 2. The Sidewinder streaks downward. The MiG pilot sees it too late. The explosion shatters the morning sky. Another MiG swings behind Cunningham's Phantom almost instantly. Tracer fire flashes past the canopy. Brake right. 9GS slam into Cunningham's chest. The Phantom groans but holds. Instead of continuing the flat turn, Cunningham relaxes slightly, bleeding just enough speed to create separation in closure rates. The MiG overshoots. For a split second, the North Vietnamese pilot realizes the trap. Too late. The Phantom rolls inside his turn. Fox 2. The missile detonates against the MiG's fuselage. Flame erupts. Pieces spiral downward toward the paddies beyond Hanoi. The radio net crackles with stunned voices. 2 more MiGs down. But the fight is far from over. A third MiG darts in low, trying to bracket the Phantom pair. The pilot is aggressive, determined not to repeat his comrade's mistakes. He climbs steeply, trying to force Cunningham vertical. Cunningham smiles behind the mask. He's seen this before. Instead of chasing, he extends slightly, then rolls inverted into a descending cutoff, converting altitude into speed with precision. The MiG pulls tighter, bleeding energy. Driscoll times it perfectly. Tone, steady, steady. Fox 2. The missile arcs upward this time, striking the MiG as it struggles at the top of its climb. The explosion is brilliant against the sun. 3 kills in a single mission. On the ground at Phuoc, radar controllers watch their scopes with growing disbelief. Intercepts are collapsing faster than they can adjust vectors. Pilots who once pressed confidently into merges now disengage early, sometimes too early, ceding airspace. The Americans are not simply reacting. They are dictating. By midday, reports accumulate. Multiple MiGs shot down across different sectors. Navy crews trained at Naval Air Station Miramar are executing energy tactics with ruthless consistency. In the ready rooms aboard USS Constellation, grease pencils scratch new red stars beneath cockpit rails. But the atmosphere is focused, not celebratory. Because every engagement proves the same thing. The advantage now belongs to the side that manages energy, patience, and prediction. At Phuoc that evening, Captain Gwynn stands over a map littered with red XS marking lost aircraft. They are no longer overwhelmed by our maneuvering, he says quietly. No one argues. For years, North Vietnamese pilots had relied on American overconfidence and doctrinal rigidity. Now they face opponents who have studied them, who have rehearsed their moves in California skies thousands of miles away. Pilots who refuse to be baited. Pilots who force the overshoot. Pilots who understand that, in aerial combat, panic kills faster than missiles. As night falls over Hanoi, mechanics work under dim lights repairing the remaining MiGs. Instructors gather their pilots for emergency tactical revisions. And high above the dark Gulf of Tonkin, Phantoms turn south toward their carriers, contrails fading in the dusk. The sky over North Vietnam has changed. The balance has shifted. And the realization spreading through the Vietnamese fighter community is stark. The Americans have relearned how to dogfight. May 12, 1972. 16,000 feet above the Red River Delta. The afternoon sky is streaked with smoke from earlier strikes. Burn marks scar the rail yards below Hanoi. In the distance, thunderheads build over the mountains near the Chinese border. Inside a climbing MiG-21, Lieutenant Tran Minh Phuong tightens his grip on the control stick. Ground control feeds him a vector. Bandits southeast. Angels 17. Commit. He pushes the throttle forward. The MiG accelerates, afterburner blazing bright orange behind him. For years, this moment had been simple. Climb fast. Strike hard. Force the American into a turning fight. Trust the geometry drilled into him by Soviet advisors and local instructors. But now there's hesitation. A flicker of doubt. He remembers the overshoot trap from weeks earlier. The phantom that bled speed intentionally. The missile that found him at the top of his climb. His radar warning receiver chirps faintly. Ahead, two gray shapes, F-4 Phantom II, cut across the haze. Inside the lead Phantom, the pilot has already seen him. Single bandit high 12. The backseater calls. The American doesn't dive immediately. He holds altitude. Watches. Tran commits first. He banks sharply left, attempting to force the Phantom into a horizontal fight where his smaller wing loading gives him tighter turn authority. The Phantom doesn't follow. Instead, it climbs slightly, subtle, controlled. Energy preserved. Tran tightens his turn, expecting the heavy jet to bleed speed. It doesn't. The Phantom rolls upward into a vertical displacement, disappearing momentarily against the sun. Tran pulls harder. Too hard. His airspeed bleeds off faster than expected. For a split second, the geometry flips. The Phantom drops back into view. Above him. Tone. He hears nothing, only the shriek of his own engine. But he sees the missile. A white streak cutting across blue sky. He slams the stick right, deploying flares. The Sidewinder curves, adjusting. The explosion punches the MiG's tail section. The aircraft tumbles violently. Hundreds of feet away, the Phantom pulls away cleanly, already scanning for the next threat. Back at Fujian, the pattern is undeniable. Interceptions are increasingly short. Engagements that once lasted minutes now end in seconds. Pilots report the same phenomenon. The Americans are patient. They do not chase. They wait. Instructors revise doctrine again. More caution. More discipline. Avoid vertical traps. Abort sooner if geometry deteriorates. But caution carries its own cost. Strike packages now push deeper with fewer interruptions. Bomb loads hit rail lines and storage depots with growing accuracy. Meanwhile, aboard USS Constellation, ready room briefings are different than they were years earlier. A young pilot stands before a chalkboard diagram. If they split vertical, we hold energy. No blind chase. Heads nod. These are graduates of Naval Air Station Miramar. They speak in terms of angles off, closure rates, lift vector placement. They understand that every maneuver is a transaction. Altitude traded for speed, speed traded for position. More importantly, they believe in it. Confidence has migrated north. By late 1972, the Navy's air-to-air kill ratio has climbed dramatically compared to the early years of the war. But numbers alone cannot capture what truly shifted. In aerial combat, hesitation is fatal. In 1967, it was often the American pilot hesitating, second-guessing missiles, overcommitting to turns, reacting instead of dictating. In 1972, that hesitation flickers in MiG cockpits instead. A half-second pause before committing to a merge. A slightly earlier disengagement. A subtle shift from aggression to caution. It's enough. High above Hanoi on another humid afternoon, a pair of Phantoms orbit patiently. A MiG climbs toward them. This time, the American pilots don't even wait for the merge. They anticipate the intercept geometry, cut it off early, and fire from advantage. Another explosion blooms in the sky. On the ground, Captain Gwyn watches the smoke trail through binoculars. He lowers them slowly. They have learned, he says quietly, not just how to fly, how to fight, how to think in 3 dimensions, how to resist instinct and control energy like a weapon. The sky over North Vietnam is still lethal. SAMs still rise. Anti-aircraft fire still claws at strike packages. MiG pilots still fight with courage and skill. But the psychological edge, the intangible force that tips close battles, has shifted. The Americans are no longer overwhelmed. Now, when phantoms appear over the Delta, it is the North Vietnamese controllers who calculate more carefully, who warn their pilots sooner, who understand that the heavy jets trailing smoke are no longer predictable prey. They are trained hunters. And it began thousands of miles away, in California skies over Miramar, where instructors tore apart bad habits and rebuilt fighter instinct from the ground up. The war in the air did not end overnight. But from 1972 onward, one truth became increasingly clear. The balance of confidence had changed sides.